Good morning and thank you. So I've got a question for you. How do you select the technologies that you choose for your business? How do you know that the technologies you're selecting are just right? And let's face it, today, we have more choices than we've ever had before, and I'd argue that we're in the middle of what I think is the most radical transformations in business history. And that transformation, as many of you know, is characterized by the fundamental use and leverage of technology, and in particular software, in the way you run your companies to support your customers. And in fact, based on the amount of software development that most enterprises do today, I'd argue that you're already software companies. And it's in the presence of that change and transformation that we're enabling new kinds of relationships and interactions with our customers. And so in that context, how do you pick technology? How do you decide? In the midst of all that newfound opportunity and arguably all that newfound complexity, how do you know that what you're choosing is just right? So when thinking about the context of what's changing in our technology landscape, I thought about looking at other industries that might provide some insight into how things are evolving in software and IT. And I looked to the area of big history. How many of you are familiar with big history? Okay, great. Big history, so big history is an emerging academic discipline that focuses on history in the context of time from the Big Bang until present. And so one way to think about it is, if you think about conventional history, really looks at, from 530 BCE till today, and it looks at human civilization. Whereas big history looks over 14 billion years and focuses on how humankind fits. And there's some really interesting things that happen in big history. So there's a great historian, there's a lot of interesting material on this, a guy by the name of David Christian, who spent a lot of time looking at repeating patterns over that 14 billion years of evolution of humanity, and looked for patterns that could help inform the future. And so here's a couple of things that really struck me as relating to what we're dealing with now. The first is called the Goldilocks theory, or the Goldilocks principle. Now, you all know the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? Goldilocks is kind of traipsing through the woods. She comes to a house. She knocks on the door. There's no answer. She goes inside the house. There's 3 bowls of porridge. She tries each one. 1 bowl's too hot, 1 bowl's too cold, and 1 bowl's just right. And so in big history, the Goldilocks theory, the Goldilocks principle, applies to a set of conditions that had to be just right in order for life to form on Earth and for civilization and humanity as we know it to exist, right? And those conditions, weren't present in other planets, right? If you're on Venus, you're a little too close to the sun, so it's too hot. If you're on Mars, you're a little too far away, it's too cold, so the conditions weren't right. But for Earth, the conditions were just right. And so what led up to that were these kind of interesting things called threshold moments. And in these threshold moments, there was radical change. There was radical change in the galaxy. At the beginning of the galaxy, when you go back to that 14 billion years ago, it's just gases. But then, through this convergence of amazing amount of energy, the death of a star, a supernova, a staggering amount of heat and light are created in an instant, in a second. And as a result of that threshold moment, that chaos, is created new elements. And so things like gold and lead were formed. And the basic building blocks that were allowed planets and stars to form. But most notably, that all the elements in the periodic table came out of those threshold moments. And so it's interesting, those threshold moments, the other side of the threshold moments was a lot more complexity. But because of that complexity, things like Earth were able to form. And there was a concept that chaos catalyzes creativity. And a great example of that in big history is when Asteroid hits Earth. Earth is enshrouded in a cloud of cosmic dust. All the dinosaurs go extinct, but new life forms emerge, and humanity exists. And I think about this in context of where we are. And it strikes me that there are remarkable similarities between what we see in big history and where we are today with technology. And you just think about where we are, think about these threshold moments. Think about the threshold moments for new technology emerging from large social media companies, new technologies based on open source, new database technologies based on open source. Threshold moments. The landscape changes, and we see a massive proliferation of technical choices, many of them that you have to cope with today. We're going to come back to this concept in this threshold moment, these complexities that we see increasing, and whether or not the technologies you're choosing are just right for you to have your Goldilocks moment. And so we know what's happening. We're making a shift to digital, that your businesses have to change and adapt. But in that context of complexity, you can't ignore it. And you know what? The fact is the complexity is actually helping right now because you have more choices. But here's what complexity looks like in most organizations. Many things in motion at the same time, right? Your development methodologies and approaches are adapting and changing as you're becoming more and more software-centric businesses. The tools that you're using are evolving quickly, and you've got more to pick from. The technologies, and particularly in the database category, have proliferated dramatically, not just in the domain of the traditional proprietary vendors, but now a whole range of open source technologies like Postgres that force you to make new choices. And complexity shows up in the form of budgets and the difficulties you have with aligning a whole set of emerging needs and requirements to support your customers with similarly constrained budgets of the past. And let's take a little bit of a look at what you have to do with risk, because you have to manage risk also as you make the shift to digital. What does risk look like? At a baseline, risk looks like your ability to serve your customers effectively, to serve them the way they want to be served, particularly in the context of increased competition and new forms of competition. And risk looks like your ability to maintain growth rates and profitability at the same time. And in IT, risk looks like continuing to provide the capabilities and have the ability to support, to provision, to help scale, and to enable business units that are playing a bigger role in technology. And all the while, you've got to be more dynamic and more agile. So let's talk a little bit about how digitization is driving business agility. Okay, so I'm going to share a personal story that just happened. Unfortunately, this past week, I was in my car. I was in a parking garage. It's kind of a tight parking garage. And one of the concrete poles kind of jumped out in front of me, and I managed to scrape it with the side of my car. And so I was no sooner out of the garage, I picked up the phone, I was on my cell phone, I called my insurance company, USA, I'm an old Army guy, so I called USA Insurance. USA answers the phone, and immediately I noticed, first of all, they know me because I got my cell phone number. They know where I am. They know what car I'm in. That part I guess they know I'm the primary driver of my car. And so she immediately is sizing everything up, and she says, okay, I understand you had an accident. Is anybody hurt? I'm like, yeah, no one but my ego. And she immediately then goes in and pulls up a list, and while we were on the phone, she starts talking to me about the shops that can look at it. I've described the damage. This is happening in a matter of minutes. So this whole transaction is smarter. And in fact, while we're on the phone, she pulls up a screen, and she's already telling me about the shops around me physically close to where I actually am that could actually help me fix it and to look at the car. So then she says, okay, we don't have a shop that can look at this near you that does a USA certified adjustment, so we'll have an adjuster come to you. So while we're on the phone, this is all happening in a matter of minutes. She gets the adjuster on the other phone. She bridges him to me. Now it's me, USA, and adjuster on the phone, agreeing to when we're going to meet in the parking lot at our offices at EDB the next morning. Right? So things are now happening in real time. So I meet the adjuster the next morning. He comes and looks at my car. It's really not as bad as it sounds. It's a little scratch. Could happen to anybody. And he says, he lines it up, he says, yeah, it looks like this, this, and this. He doesn't give me a number, but he goes, we'll have this squared away soon. He goes online, he files his report. Within 3 hours, I have a check deposited in my account, minus the deductible, unfortunately. All of that happened in less than 24 hours. That whole system, it was smarter, it happened all in real time, and it was massively automated. And this is when we talk about business agility, this is what business agility looks like. But all of that capability, all that competence was enabled by technology and integration. But it speaks to leveraging your technical assets to create greater customer insight and to drive profitability. Think about how much cost was ripped out of that system in that example. And so this is a little bit of a view of what digital leaders, what benefits accrue to digital leaders in their businesses. And I love this. This is a survey that was done by McKinsey, and in it they measure a bunch of things. They measure strategy, they measure culture, they measure organization, and they measure capabilities. And they looked at 230 companies globally. But here's what you see, and the stats are shocking and fantastic. The top quartile of performers, that's the upper 25%, perform better than the bottom 75% in very meaningful ways across key statistics. In terms of revenue growth, top quartile performs 5 times better than the bottom 75%. In operating profit, those same digital leaders enjoy 8 times the operating profit than their operating profit growth than their peers. And in terms of return to shareholder growth, they enjoy a 2 times improvement over the bottom 75%. I mean, these are shocking statistics, right? And they're so compelling, and you're going to see more examples, and you're going to talk to people here today that will articulate this even more. So what does that look like? How is the upper quartile addressing digitization in their businesses? So these are some of the examples that we're starting to see our customers and you use. You know, and this isn't the whole list, but this is the face of digitization today in large enterprise. You see it emerging with cloud technologies, and this isn't just public cloud technologies. This includes private cloud, it includes hybrid and the blending of those, and multi-cloud environments. DevOps, and we'll come back to this, has become a centerpiece into how companies manage and deploy technical resources. We see more and more examples of companies now trying to take the monolithic systems and break them into smaller and smaller, more granular and reusable parts, and breaking it down into microservices. Sometimes we see people on that way go to mini services to create efficiencies and leverage and scalability. And now we're seeing a dramatic increase in the replacement of the traditional human analytics that we've seen for a long time in business about helping a company get smarter, transformed and transitioned into artificial intelligence and machine learning. This is how digitization looks inside companies. But in the middle of that, there are challenges. These are the challenges that you guys face. Remember we talked about those threshold moments, and after the threshold moments, there's a lot more complexity. Well, guess what? That's the complexity that we're seeing today. And this is a survey that Gartner did that identified the top challenges that face infrastructure and operations. And so it's a pretty long list. And you see 3 years here of history from 14 is the blue bar, 15 is the green bar, and 16 is the yellow bar. So there are some interesting changes, and it's a pretty meaty list of challenges. Remember we talk about complexity? There's more to it than that, I think. There's 2 kinds of things on this list. One, I would call, the continuous improvement or modernization initiatives that you guys spend a lot of your time in. And a good example of that is modernizing your legacy applications or developing a private-public hybrid cloud strategy. Really important business initiatives, really important technology initiatives, but they're part and parcel to how you've always operated in the context of modernization and incremental improvement. But there's other lists on the same list. There's other things that are much more focused on new initiatives, new capabilities, and your ability to innovate. And those look like things, supporting emerging digital business initiatives, or implementing a software-defined data center. And so when we talk about the list in and of itself, yeah, it's kind of complex. These challenges are growing, but there are two kinds of challenges here. And that makes it even more complex. So how do the challenges manifest themselves in day-to-day business? Well, we see patterns emerge with our customers in two key areas. There are clear organizational barriers that are starting to form. Line of business, as you know, is starting their own application groups, demanding more from IT, or in some cases bypassing IT altogether. And the companies today want their businesses to take initiative. Remember we talked about, the complexity and the proliferation of technologies? One of the best aspects of that complexity is we've made technology and software in particular more consumable by the whole business operation. It's not just the domain of IT, but with that complexity comes a new set of challenges that have to be addressed. And so we see this tension, and when we see these organizations go completely rogue, business operations, we often hear the expression of shadow IT, something that we have to pay attention to. But we know IT is leaning in and trying to help by providing platform as a service environments that embrace the requisite security and infrastructure, code management capabilities that allow businesses to operate in this new development environment. But we still see a gap. Many of our largest customers still operate out of IT with this thesis that if we build it, they will come. So adapting to the pace of digital is a big challenge. But there are ways through this. And there's a good reason to get through it. And this is a talk you're going to hear from McKinsey. Santiago Comella Dorda is going to talk, and this is just a snapshot from him. You've got to go see his talk. But McKinsey did some research, and they looked at traditional companies that had been experimenting with digital practices on a variety of projects. And inside of that group, they saw, the focus was on Agile in general, but they saw basically 20% said they were mature adopters. They would have considered themselves mature with relatively widespread adoption. So here's the powerful statistic in that. That 20% that were mature adopters of Agile approaches in their business accelerate innovation by 80%. And think about that. Think about the advantage that you get by moving to more Agile business operations. So let's get into some of the finer details about what it means to move at the pace of digital. Because at the end of the day, this isn't the world of pixie dust. There are real and tangible steps that you can take to become more agile. And I think that you can find that bowl of porridge that's just right with technology and with database so that you can create your Goldilocks condition. Let me give you an example, simple example to start. Large bank in Singapore, a bank I visited with about a month ago. Growing in that market, I think fourth or fifth largest bank in that market, and wanting to expand in the region. And think about banks. How do banks expand? You got to put branches in, wherever you're going to go, and you got to have people come in. People got to have credentials. With the credentials, they say, I want bank account, and you open an account, and hence the banking relationship is formed. This particular bank has redefined themselves in the context of digital. So they're thinking about how to approach markets fundamentally differently, and this comes from the C-suite. And so as they looked at going to a new market, and this particular market they were going into was India, they recognized, okay, we need an outlet, and we need people coming in with identification. They figured out and understand that in India, personal identification has been highly digitized and is stored with thumbprint. And so the way they approached that market was entirely digital. They said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put thumbprint readers in a chain of coffee shops. So all you got to do is come in for your morning coffee with your thumb, and you can open up a bank account. And in a very short amount of time, they opened up bank accounts for millions of Indian citizens in a market they'd never been in before, with none of the infrastructure other than thumb readers they put into the coffee shops. That's moving at the pace of digital. So here's a couple of things that I think will help provide some insight. You are becoming software companies, and as you become software companies, DevOps is the new form of agile manufacturing. Remember the old days of kind of, long mechanical process manufacturing moved into the agile world? Well, in enterprise, I believe that DevOps has become that equivalent as you emerge as software businesses, and takes the shape around platform as a service and around continuous delivery, microservices, and containers, things we'll talk about in a minute. So moving at the pace of digital also suggests that just right has to include more flexible data models. You know this. You've got data coming from new sources you never had before, and in different forms. And so you need technologies that allow you to manage that holistically. So moving at the pace of digital requires the underpinning of more flexible data models. And it's not like you get to move digital and forget about kind of keeping the shop in order, right? You have to maintain operational control. So you have to have resource visibility that you've never had before. You've got assets and resources deployed everywhere. You've got them deployed in your traditional on-prem systems. You've got them deployed now in the cloud. You may have them geographically deployed in business unit operations, spread out all over the world, and you can't give up that operational control. So one of the things that underpins digital and moving at the pace of digital is your ability to maintain good resource visibility. And let's talk about skills. You got incredibly well-trained staff. And you know what? That staff, to kind of live only in the past, you got to bring them to the future. You got to bring them to the model that you're moving to. And so you've got to invest in technologies that make that easy, but you got to train them and educate them so that they can move forward. We're going to talk about some interesting new training opportunities around Postgres in a couple of minutes. And the last thing is no one really rips and replaces legacy. It doesn't work that way. We evolve forward, which means we hold on to those parts of legacy that are helpful and valuable. So you need systems. If you want to move at the pace of digital, you need systems that are compatible with your existing tools and technologies. And of course, we're moving at the pace of digital. Doesn't mean you give up security. And today, as you know, we have more ubiquitous access to information than we've ever had. And that's a bidirectional kind of relationship. We have more information as consumers, and our vendors have more information about us. And using the example of my car, which happens to be a Ram, my car shares information, through the internet with a home server. It tells me things about my car's status. It keeps me updated on what's, when I need maintenance, when I need service. If I have an emergency, I hit a button, it knows exactly where I am. So it keeps track of me. There's a lot of information in that bidirectional flow. But I'm not sure I want him to know where I'm going when I'm going there. So we all need to know that that data is secured appropriately and only shared appropriately, and that has to be based on well-defined rules and trust and control. In a bit, we'll talk about some of the technology advancements in Postgres and EDB Postgres that'll help with that. And moving at the pace of digital, we talked about it a minute ago, means you gotta embrace cloud technologies as part of your strategy. And most of you are doing that. But cloud technologies are getting more and more complex too. Gone are the days where you just have a single point of cloud deployment in a public cloud environment. I think almost all of you are deploying some form of private cloud, public cloud, sometimes integrated, sometimes not. And more, we're seeing you go to multi-cloud strategies. And those all have to be thoughtfully and effectively integrated so that you can maintain more operational control. And so here's what I think. I think Postgres is that just right bowl of porridge. I think Postgres gives you all of those things that you need to put yourself in a position to go digital. Hey, the world got more complex. We got more elements than we've ever had before in the form of new data technologies. And you got to pick the ones that are just right. And I think Postgres is that technology. And you're not alone. This is a great chart that shows the popularity of open source with, as held up against commercial proprietary licenses. And you'll notice those two lines are on a crash course running into each other. And I predict that before 2017 is over, and we'll come back, when you come back next year, we can check me on this, but before 2017 is over, those lines will cross. And the popularity of open source style licenses will eclipse that of the traditional commercial proprietary licenses. And let's go in a little bit deeper. This is a survey, I love this survey from Stack Overflow, surveyed over 60,000 developers, and in 2016, it's the first time that they surveyed about database specifically. And you'll notice here the most used databases. Number 3 most used database across 60,000 developers, Postgres. After MySQL and SQL Server, and ahead of Mongo, Oracle, and a few others. And now look at the most loved. For those of you who like Postgres, this is nice to see. Developers love Postgres. In fact, after Redis, second most loved, but ahead of Mongo and a whole bunch of others. And so why is it? Why is Postgres just right? So at its basic level, Postgres, as you know, is the most versatile database management system that you can get from open source. Right? We know it runs everything. It speaks every language that you can think to program in. You can deploy it literally on any kind of infrastructure. You can deploy it on bare metal across every operating system platform. You can deploy it in the cloud, in virtually every cloud, public and private. You can deploy it in containers. You can deploy it onto platform as a service solutions. So you can put Postgres anywhere you want. And the beauty of Postgres, I think, as you guys know, some of you have been around for a while, it scales. Guess what? We've always thought of Postgres as scaling vertically, which we know it does extraordinarily well, but it also scales horizontally well. I think today we talk about our sweet spot, database size 2 to 15 terabytes with hundreds of thousands of users. We have great examples of customers. You have thousands of concurrent users. So this issue of is Postgres really ready for enterprise? Yeah, that's ancient history. But that's the basis of why Postgres is as popular and as loved as it is. So I'm going to talk about the role of Postgres in digital. And as part of this, I want to ask Jason Davis to come up, who leads our database server product management. So let's talk about the role of Postgres specifically in digital. And I want to talk a little bit about EDB Postgres and some of the things that we've done to help address the complexity in this landscape. So you know that data management space spans a wide range of types of deployments. And you can take that really from the edge, where customer interaction events and streaming for the Internet of Things is happening, kind of on one end. But that flows through an operational database that captures the transaction and extends beyond that into the world of big data and the Hadoop ecosystem. And then also has to tie in and integrate in the world of legacy data and legacy databases where asset management and core financials have to be linked and pulled in through that operational database. And let's not forget the role of the data warehouse, which still has a place in ad hoc investigation and reporting. All of these things congeal together. And EDB Postgres supports this, one, by providing a great core database technology. But in addition, we support it through replication capabilities from legacy systems and links to big data through Spark and connections to edge capture systems through microservices and data adapters. So we're going beyond just the basis of the database to help bring together technologies that allow you to expand the role of Postgres in digital. And so let's look at that in the context of Agile and how Postgres can help you be agile. First, it's a multi-model database that supports key value, supports obviously traditional structured SQL, as well as JSON-B. Today we offer Postgres in containers in the leading PaaS systems, including Cloud Foundry and OpenShift. And finally, we provide Postgres for you as a database as a service to allow you the opportunity to self-service provision multi-node, high available Postgres clusters. And to spend a minute on that, I'm going to ask Jason Davis to do a quick demo of EDB Arc.
Great. Thanks, Ed. So I'm going to take you on maybe about a 5-minute tour of EDB Postgres Arc. Arc is a technology, a product that's evolved over the last 5 years. We've had this technology running on Amazon Web Services for about 5 years now. Arc is a platform that allows you to provision and manage databases in cloud environments. You can provision single database instances, high availability instances, and auto-elastically scaling instances. I'll show you a little bit about how that works. In terms of the architecture, right, on the right over here, you see a picture of the type of clusters that we deploy. So we deploy private database instances on resources that are available in the cloud on Amazon and EC2. If you're deploying into OpenStack, we make use of those compute resources, coming soon to the Azure platform and others. But essentially what you have is a private database not shared with other individuals, other companies, your own instance. It sets up for you masters and replicas, so it'll automatically set up streaming replication, and has a load balancer that's built in, so it'll automatically route your read requests amongst the replicas to support load balancing. On the left is a picture of the Arc management server itself. The one thing I just wanted to call out here is this notion of an abstraction layer that we have underneath the JCloud instance that we use. And this is how we're able to provision databases to different cloud environments. We started off with OpenStack when we launched Arc, deployed it now to AWS, and coming soon to Azure. So how do you get access to Arc? Well, you can come to our website. You can download an image that you can load up onto OpenStack. Or if you're on the internet, you're using AWS today, you could Google for EDB Arc AWS and come right to our marketplace page. And from here, you can launch the Arc instance, configure it, and basically set it up so that your operational and development teams now have access to this environment where they can provision and manage their databases. So let me show you what it looks like. Here's an image of the Arc console. I've got it running right now. And I'm logged in essentially as an operational administrator. So I have a list of all of the clusters, all the databases that have been deployed in my environment, either by myself or by my developers that I've given access to. And you actually see right here my production cluster that's spinning up a new replica, because in the background I have some workloads that are running, and it noticed that it was passing through the threshold for elastic scalability, and it's giving me a new instance right now. You can see over here the number of connections that have kicked in have broken through the threshold value that's indicated in red, so it decides to spin up a new cluster. So let me tell you a little bit more about what you can do here in Arc while it's spinning it up. Over here on the left are a set of commands, a set of essentially primitives that we provide. I can create a new cluster, scale up, scale down, take a backup, clone a cluster, patch it when I'm ready. When I want to apply a new maintenance patch, I'll determine when to do that. I could upgrade machine class types. If I want to move from a small or a medium up to a large or an extra large, we can do that automatically as well. These primitives not only available through the UI, but also through an API. So if you're using Chef or Puppet or any orchestration tool to deploy your databases, you can use these same primitives. But instead of having to set up your own highly available clusters, Arc takes care of it for you. So over here, I've got the production cluster selected. You can see I've got 3 nodes that are running, all on different availability zones. So we automatically make sure that we distribute amongst the different data centers within a given region. And then on the left over here, some information about the cluster. I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom, and you can see these auto-scaling thresholds. This is where the operational admin specifies when they want the scalability to kick in. I'm going to just show you 2 other quick things here in the Arc console. As an administrator, right, I'm an operational admin. One of the things I want to do is make sure that there's a level of control. Right, that my developers have access to databases that I have given them access to. So in this case, I have two database engine templates available, an advanced server 9.6 version and also one that has PostGIS involved, because maybe my developers are writing geospatial applications, and I want it to be really simple for them to provision databases that have just those extensions that they need. Another thing that you see down here, not filled in, but just to highlight, integration with the Red Hat subscription management system. So if you're deploying databases and using Red Hat as an operating system, this will integrate with your subscription environment and make sure that licensing and inventory is all taken care of for you. The last thing that I'm going to show here with Arc, as it's still spinning up that cluster, the backups. You see also over here that I have two other single instances that are running. These are development consoles, essentially, somebody who's building a new application if they want to run some tests. One of the other nice things that we have is the ability to take some backups. So for example, I might have, as a developer, a backup of a database for running my functional tests. And I can quickly restore that into a new database and start to do my development and testing. The last thing I'll show before I turn it back over to Ed is that this environment also extended and provided in Pivotal Cloud Foundry. In the Cloud Foundry environment, this is an apps manager. If you're familiar with Cloud Foundry, your developers are going here to build their new applications. Sometimes they need a persistent service where they can store their data. Well, we have an Arc tile as well as a Postgres tile. So if you want to just provision and bind to a Postgres database, you can do that. If you want to make use of that Arc server and deploy a private database for yourself, you can do that as well. And here I just wanted to point out that your URL, this is the same Arc server that we're talking to on the Arc console. So many different places to have access to this information. Ed?
Great, thank you, Jason. Good job. And let me just add one other thing. EDB Arc is based on technology. It used to be called Postgres Plus Cloud Database, which we were running on Amazon. I think we launched that in 2012. So we have experience over hundreds of customers. So excellent progress with the technology, but based on real customer use. So let's talk a little bit about Postgres in a modern architecture. Modern application architectures are fully supported through our container-native packaging of EDB Postgres platform and our support for new JavaScript frameworks like Node.js. Be sure to come later today to see Oscar Herrera's session on how to build algebra systems on Postgres using Docker containers and give you an excellent insight into how Postgres is now part of modern architectures. And Postgres is fully integrated. Maybe, Jason, you could spend a minute on this.
Sure. So, we talked a little bit before about how Postgres is just right. This is another example of that, integration technologies. Your database doesn't live in a silo. You need to connect to other systems, be it legacy systems like legacy proprietary systems like your Oracle or SQL Server backends that might be running your ERP business. You need to replicate that in to maybe a Postgres environment. Or you need to connect to a Hadoop or a Mongo where you have a lot of other data stored and you need to query that in the context of a transaction running in Postgres. We support that capability. In addition, a level of compatibility. This is what EDB Postgres Advanced Server was originally born on, the idea that you can take users that are comfortable with tools from other vendors like Oracle and start running that in EDB Postgres, tools that have that level of familiarity and have syntax and semantical compatibility. So that's a way that we look at Postgres being integrated and, again, just right for your environment. Also, in terms of security, row-level security, new in Postgres as of, I believe, the last release in 9.5, something that's existed in our advanced server for a number of years before that. Auditing capabilities. You need to know who's doing what on your database, who's changing what schemas, what DDL is being run. There's auditing capabilities built into advanced server and improvements that are coming in version 10 based on feedback we've been hearing from our customers. And then also integration, again, with the rest of your ecosystem. You're running LDAP, Active Directory, Kerberos. You need to delegate that authentication and authorization from Postgres. It's just right. In terms of reliability, right? Most important job of a DBA, you can't let your database go down. You can't lose your data. So you need highly available configurations. Showed you a little bit of that with Arc, but we also provide that on premises in bare metal as well, streaming replication, the ability to do failover, et cetera. You need disaster recovery. You need backup on-site, off-site. You need to be able to manage at scale. You're going to have many, many databases, and you want to be able to set configurations across those as the different database types need certain configurations. Production needs certain things. Development instances need others. And then automated provisioning. We showed you Arc already. That's one way that we handle automated provisioning.
Great, thanks. And so I'm delighted to announce that we just released Postgres Enterprise Manager 7. We released that yesterday, and I'm going to ask Jason to do a short demo on PEM 7. You can't leave yet, Jason.
So another short demo here. Let me take you quickly through PEM 7. So if we switch over to the screen here. So PEM 7, there's much more detailed demos out in the demo ground, so I encourage you to go take a look at that. But I wanted to show you here just a few quick things. One, I'm logged into my PEM 7 instance. PEM is built on a front end called pgadmin. Those who are familiar with Postgres know pgadmin 4 was released about a year ago. New interface, web-based interface. Enterprise Manager sits kind of behind that and provides a set of additional tools and dashboards to allow you to more easily manage your environment in mass. What I have here is one advanced server database that's running, some object analysis here so I can see my largest tables that are running, largest indexes in this database, et cetera. The one thing that I wanted to show here, and tying into the security and the audit capabilities, is how we have a set of management tools. This is what's unique to Enterprise Manager here. I can go in and say, hey, I want all my advanced server instances to have auditing enabled, and I want to have audit for all of my connections and disconnection attempts. So I can go through a wizard like this, select however many of my advanced server databases that might be available, and set up the different configurations so that, in this case, I'll have a log output going to CSV, and I'll specify what type of material it is that I want to audit. So here I'll say I want to audit all connection and disconnection attempts, and then some log statements. So it's just that easy to go ahead and configure things like auditing or any of the other tools here. Log Manager if you want to configure your Postgres logs, if you want to run an expert tool that'll tell you what type of configurations you should be making. A whole lot of management tools. Again, I encourage you to go out to the demo forums and take a look at what we have here with PEM 7.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. Let's hear for Jason.
Thank you.
And so last, we'll talk about Postgres everywhere. And we talked about this before. We can deploy Postgres on bare metal, virtualized environments, public clouds, OpenStack, and containers. And for your database technology to be just right, it's just the fact that it has to be able to be deployed everywhere. All right. So we don't just want to stop by addressing your just right question with the technology alone. You know, we know the technology is the foundation. If we don't do anything else right, we've got to make sure that those technologies serve that new, more complex set of needs. But I think to fit technology into business, we got to go beyond that. And we've heard from many of you that there's a drive and a passion to get more comfortable and more familiar with Postgres and to understand more deeply what's happening with Postgres and in the Postgres technology and ecosystem. And so as part of that, I'd like to invite Jamie Watt to the stage. We're delighted to introduce a new community forum called Postgres Rocks to help bring more people around the Postgres ecosystem into the conversation.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're excited to announce the launch, as Ed said, of PostgresRocks.net. This is a platform which is purposed to enable the delivery of content as well as the creation of knowledge across anybody in the community. Now, powering this effort are three elements. You can see here we've got discussions, such as getting started with Postgres, PostgreSQL, tools, Amazon, as well as Postgres and containers. The second major element is the knowledge base, where the gems that come out of these conversations are actually housed, in a sense, to produce both solutions and answers to the questions that we produce. Finally, you'll see Postgres Gems, which is a blog platform where some of the biggest voices in the Postgres community can come and share their thoughts. Let's take a look. So if we dig into the first post here, we'll see, one, the author, which is Robert Haas. Two, of course, the content that's relative to it. These are the new features that are in PostgreSQL 10. And you can also see the metadata on the right? So if you're looking specifically for tags, you can find that here. And you can search for similar content across the entire platform to find like purposing. Now, if you actually enjoy the content that you're reading through, you can actually like the content at the bottom via kudos. Speaking of kudos, if we drive into the author themselves, you'll see the profile features that are able to be implemented for everyone across the platform. Badging, kudos, and the posts they've made. Kudos and badges are available to everyone. They're not specific to any particular role or any particular entitlement. This is for everyone in the community. We want to drive towards the finest level of knowledge and capability across the Postgres community. So come and join us today. We're encouraging everyone to come in and register and start the conversation. We've got a kiosk outside, and I invite everyone to come by, learn more about the platform, and register. We've also got some collateral and a bit of swag, so when you get some time, come by and join the conversation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jamie. Let's hear for Jamie. We heard what you said. You need, in addition to great technology, you got to have ways to propagate that technology thoughtfully to people in your organization. And so Postgres Rocks is one way that we want to help get the information and the word out and get our people who are engaged with Postgres in working with one another and talking to one another. We also heard from you a concern that you said there's a lack of Postgres talent in the market to support implementations. And you said that you need best practices, you need more training, you need certifications to help develop within your organizations and around your organizations that pool of Postgres talent to enable you to do what you want to do with Postgres as that just right choice. And so we're delighted to announce a new program of free training for everyone. And this is 30 hours of free on-demand training around Postgres DBA Essentials and EDB tools, but available freely to all of you. And alongside this new training, we're introducing a new digital badging with certification system that'll allow your people to get certified and to be recognized for their achievements in their capabilities with Postgres. And those achievements can be shared in their professional networks, they can be shared across social media and put your people in a position of strength in helping them with their Postgres competencies. Come by any one of the Postgres Rocks booths. Our booth will tell you a little bit more about that, but really, really excited. So far, I think we have upwards of 40 people already certified, and we hope to see that grow even more. And then the last thing I want to talk about, all of this doesn't work if the kinds of relationships and business models that support Postgres aren't in place. And your world's changing. I remember, I've been with EDB for 9 years, and I remember at the beginning of my time, even when I was at Red Hat, we measured things in terms of servers. And servers, that was the unit of value equivalent. Servers emerged and evolved to sockets, and sockets turns to cores, and cores turn to virtual cores. And that now, cores turn to containers. And the duration of time changed. The old world of perpetual forever with maintenance, that's long gone. The idea that subscriptions last for a year, that's pretty common, but you guys want subscriptions that may last for minutes. And so we're delighted to also announce EDB's new Postgres Everywhere agreement that allows you to take all your Postgres, any flavor that you use, whatever distribution and wherever you deploy it, and consolidate into one enterprise agreement that's flexible and suited to your needs. So come by, we'll talk to you a little bit more about that. And we're not alone in helping bring these kinds of capabilities to you. And in fact, if you look around this meeting, you see a whole range of very important vendors and providers who are helping build out that ecosystem and bringing just the right amount of capability and technologies to you. And I want to highlight and recognize them as our sponsors. Our diamond sponsors, special thanks to IBM as our diamond sponsor. I really want to call out our platinum sponsors, Second Quadrant. We're delighted to have you guys here and joining us here. Amazon's here, and we have Tech Data join as well. I'd like to recognize our gold sponsor, Quest, for coming. Thank you. And our silver sponsors, Microsoft. First event that Microsoft's come to, first Postgres event that Microsoft has come to. So we're delighted to have Microsoft join the Postgres family. NEC, our friends at Creative, Dell EMC, Palisade Compliance, Carahsoft, Ashnik, and the Executive Council. We're delighted to have you here. We're very grateful to have you support an event like this. And I want to recognize, again, the importance that this growing ecosystem plays in solving the kind of business problems that you face. And so as we think about the next couple of days, and you look forward to what you're going to do and what you're going to focus on, I want to ask you this question. What's your Postgres vision? Thank you.